Born in the 80s, raised in the 90s, we are the last generation that remembers life before the internet.
Except for Doug.
We blew into our NES cartridges, we rewound our VHS tapes. We are the Inner Light Project, and we are so glad to be back with you today. Our podcast today is going to take us into the world of Superman, mainly by way of the Zack Snyder masterpiece, classic, whatever you want to call it, entitled Man of Steel. And so with me, I've got my friends Doug Bailey, Nathan Tolley, and Pastor Derrick McCarson, and we're going to just explore the world of Superman, mainly through the movie Man of Steel, and we're just going to talk a little bit about the theological connotations. We're going to talk some about the music, as well as some of the comic book background as well. So, Derrick, what have you got for us?
All right, so we'll start off with some fast facts because we're nerds and we care about that stuff. Just a couple of introducing facts here. If you haven't seen Man of Steel, you really need to. And you don't have to have a lot of prerequisite knowledge about Superman to see it, because it is an origin story. And so you don't have to see the Christopher Reeve series, although you should, just to be up on all of that. So Man of Steel released June 14th, 2013, which was supposed to coincide with the 75th anniversary of the Superman comics. Did each of you see it in the theater? I did.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And at least the three of us saw it together. I do remember that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you guys remember that when we used to go to the movie theater when
What
they
is
were
that?
open?
Right.
And you could actually go in and watch a
Yeah.
movie with other people.
Yeah, that was like the
What?
best experience.
And Derrick, I know you're going to talk more on this later, but one of my most vivid memories of when the three of us, myself, you, and Doug went to see it, we were not even 5 steps out of the theater, and you were already talking about the Christian connections.
Oh, yeah.
with
It
the
was
movie.
just very overt, and we're going to get into all that. Of course, as Preston already suggested, it was directed by Zack Snyder. He is also director of Dawn of the Dead, 300, and Watchmen. Those are the projects that he did leading up to Man of Steel.
He did Dawn of the Dead?
The reboot,
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
according to IMDb.
Huh.
So,
All right.
and of course, we will be referring to the Snyderverse as we go forward.
It's coming.
Because Man of Steel really sort of brought a new feel, a new look into the DC universe and all the characters that would follow. Now, the film was a smashing box office success. Listen to this. It grossed more than $668 million worldwide. The budget, $258 million. So it definitely brought in some cash. Yeah. And I contributed to that as well.
We all did.
The cast, great cast. Does everybody like the casting in this movie?
Oh, yeah.
Any characters?
Henry Cavill, that dude was born to play Superman.
Yeah, I agree, and we've
Yeah.
had that discussion before. So, Henry Cavill is
There were
Kal-El.
There were parts of the
Clark
movie,
Kent.
you know when Henry Cavill's a great Superman when my wife is watching it and I have to wave my hand in front of her to be like, "Are you
Remember
'cause
me,
she was just
your
so-
husband?
Yeah, she was so fixated
Over here.
on Henry Cavill, and but at the same time that's usually a good mark.
Wasn't that scene where he was running out of the ocean or anything?
Oh, you know what? I think that was the scene.
Shirtless Henry Cavill. You know that's CG. That's not real.
That's not real. Those muscles ain't real.
And I mean, and yet another example of a British actor killing it in an American role.
Couldn't even tell he had the
Yeah.
British accent.
I mean, I actually never knew Henry Cavill was British until I saw the making of Man of Steel. You know, I hadn't seen any of his previous work, but once that came out and then I was listening to him in an interview, it was just this mind-blown moment for me.
You probably wouldn't even recognize him either because he had to gain so much weight
Yeah.
for this part.
Yeah,
so.
there's a section on the special features DVD about all of the CrossFit and extra training that he had to do to put on weight and get ripped for the role. So,
And well, see, I was reading, they did say they wanted to have him do steroids just to like bulk up quick, and he said absolutely not.
They did the same program for Ben Affleck
Yeah.
when he became Batman for the follow-up movie Batman.
Did say he was getting burned out on boiled chicken. He ate a lot of boiled chicken.
Anyway, I agree, guys. Henry Cavill definitely had the look and the feel. He was born to play that role. Amy Adams played Lois Lane, and some people may have criticized her casting or her portrayal of Lois Lane. She was kind of snarky at times, kind of a smart aleck, always trying to compete with the guys, but I don't know. You guys like that?
I thought it was a good reimagining of that character.
Okay.
I mean, and overall, the movie as a whole was meant to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that was my take on Amy Adams' portrayal.
Yeah, and a lot of other versions I've seen, especially like either in the comic books or even like the old movies, animated, whatever. She's always been like a strong character that's driven to get the
like
story.
The Princess Leia type.
Yeah,
Always getting herself in trouble.
yeah.
Or and
Falling off buildings all the time. I mean,
now you guys correct me on this if this sounds off base, but a lot of the earlier comic renditions of Lois Lane, it was almost like a damsel in distress kind of scenario, and then when Man of Steel comes along, the character's reimagined into more of an independent type of more self-driven.
To a certain extent. I mean, she
Okay.
still had that female that wanted to be driven to, like I said, try to find the story. But I mean, she was always getting into something.
she had that big city edge.
Yeah.
And she was already established as a important writer. Even in the comics, she was a reporter. And, well, when she met him, he was Clark. That was one of the things they departed from Man of Steel.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Okay. We got that. Okay.
So, love her, like her, Amy Adams as Lois Lane. We saw Kevin Costner make an appearance in this movie. Had a significant role playing Jonathan Kent, the father, or earthly father, rather, of Clark Kent / Superman. First time we've seen Kevin Costner in a while not in a cowboy role. And I thought he did great as dad to Superman.
Oh yeah,
He also didn't have gills behind his ears either.
This is true. And
why you got to bring up the past, man?
I know.
I thought Kevin Costner did great in the role.
Yeah.
He definitely fulfilled that and played the wise mentor type dad figure that was needed. Definitely had the gravitas to do that. And we also saw Lawrence Fishburne outside of the Matrix. That was interesting. Good to see him in that role as Perry. What's his last
Perry
name?
White.
White.
And I thought that was an excellent casting choice as well.
Yeah. Russell Crowe as Jor-El. Wasn't that
Yeah.
a brilliant choice?
Yeah.
Russell Crowe did great there.
Yeah, you would want the father of Superman to be that kind of strong male influence. We're not,
Yeah,
you know.
and he had more screen time than Marlon Brando.
Oh,
which-
yeah.
What is he in for,
Yeah.
like maybe 30 seconds?
Yeah,
in
just the
Superman
first
1?
few minutes. And I thought what Russell Crowe was an excellent successor to Marlon Brando's portrayal.
And we
I
got
really
to see
thought
a
he was
lot
worthy.
of him fill in backstory and give more of the mythology of Superman, especially with the, I don't know what you would call it, the
AI or the
AI
switch.
version.
Yeah.
that
When-
was
On the
good.
ship.
We also got to see more of the actual planet, even though it was just a glimpse as they were trying to go where Clark was being born, or not Clark, but Jor-El.
Kal-El.
I'm sorry,
It's been a long day. It's okay.
but they showed more of the planet and
Oh yeah,
everything like
we got
that.
to see a ton of Krypton. We're going to talk about that later on.
Mm.
It was awesome to see that portrayal of Krypton as kind of the dystopian, falling apart planet that was really dysfunctional, and
It wasn't
kind
like
of the art style reminded me of Geiger, the guy who was the visionary for
H.R.
Alien.
Giger, yes.
Geiger.
Yeah, oh, no, yeah, it does. When you read it, it looks like Geiger, but yeah,
Kind of
H.R. Giger.
that sort of design aesthetic kind of reminded me of Alien a little bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, great design, in my opinion, on Krypton.
What do you think of the style? It's the way they did with all the suits of armor.
Yeah, really bulked up, really neat.
That was another neat element that I thought, unless the comic books make it different, was another cool, another reimagining of how Krypton and even the Kryptonians look and how they dressed.
Yeah, so in Superman 1, you get like 30 seconds of Krypton. It's very crystalline and
Yeah, it's like very ice, almost like an ice planet.
Right. They're all wearing
sterile
snow camo.
and it just
They all had like
just
flowing
not- doesn't
gowns
fit.
on.
I'm pretty sure I saw some tauntauns running in the background.
But anyway, last significant role we saw Michael Shannon, who took the role of Zod.
I really
Zod was
enjoyed.
great.
Yeah, he was great in that part.
Definitely maniacal madman bent
Yeah.
on one cause.
Oh yeah. That's one thing I noticed about that and I actually loved about this movie was that there was no bad actors in this movie. Every actor did an amazing job in it. That's one thing I loved about it. I mean, I watched it twice.
Yeah,
today.
I know DC gets a lot of criticism for the direction that they've taken some of their movies, like Justice League, and of course we could do a whole thing about that.
We don't want to, though.
criticizing it. But when
we're
you
gonna.
look at the early DC movies, of course, the Dark Knight trilogy, Man of Steel, Justice League, Wonder Woman. I mean, the casting has been great on all of them.
Oh yeah.
And that really helps to make the picture not only better but more believable. And
Yep.
so we got to see some of our favorite people in those roles. This, as we reminded you, is a reboot of the Superman franchise. Remember, back in the late 70s, early 80s, we got the Christopher Reeve versions, Superman 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think most fans agree they get progressively worse as the number goes on. It evolves into more camp and goofiness.
Richard Pryor.
Supercomputers of doom.
Yeah, the last one, what the Quest for Peace is.
Yeah.
Just, it's just almost unwatchable.
That was almost like watching Superman versus Flash Gordon.
It would be like if Joel Schumacher was given the reins of, if you remember those
That
terrible
hurts.
Batman movies from the 90s.
Yep.
Yeah.
One man out to destroy Batman, and his name.
So they really
Director Joel
struggled with
Schumacher.
Superman 1, 2, and 3, 4 with making the character fit into society and making the character. They just really struggled with it. They hadn't had that fleshed out yet. But of course, for some people of that generation, Christopher Reeve is always going to be Superman. Nobody's ever going to top that.
Yeah.
Just like we all have our different favorites when it comes to the Joker, depending on what generation we're from and how we grew up watching Batman.
And of course, everybody's gonna say Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. Nobody else will ever be Wolverine ever again.
And everybody said that about Jack Nicklaus with the Joker, and then Heath Ledger came along, and then everybody said that about Heath Ledger, and then Joaquin Phoenix came along. So
When those, you could say that people like Jack Nicholson or Christopher Reeve, and definitely Hugh Jackman, you could certainly label those guys as the standard bearers.
sure,
Yeah.
And but like what you were saying, Nathan, a lot of those recastings, Heath Ledger, Joaquin Phoenix, they all absolutely nailed it. But that doesn't take away from people like Jack Nicholson or Christopher Reeve being the standard bearers of how those parts are acted out.
Yeah,
Every era will have their Batman, their Superman. Michael Keaton is my era Batman.
Yeah. Oh yes. Oh yeah.
I think that might be all of our Batmans.
Yeah.
But Derrick, you were talking about the origins, like they did the origin story in this, and I think that I love the fact that the way they did the origin. Yes, they did start out on Krypton, and it did show Kal-El coming to Earth, but then they cut straight to present day, and I think that's why I liked it. I felt like it worked out better instead of them going from age
And
to
getting
age.
drawn out.
Yeah.
yeah. No, and that's cool because you get to see the development and the struggle of him learning about himself and the struggle with his humanity and how is he going to fit in, and we'll get into all that in a minute. But we should also mention that there was a 2006 Batman Returns film.
Superman.
Returns.
What I say? Batman Returns. Superman Returns.
Hey, you're in the same universe, so
That's
you were
right, that's
close.
right. You're
Kind
there.
of the same title.
Superman
Close
Returns.
enough. That's all good.
2006, Bryan Singer, Brandon Routh.
I think that's how you
Ralph.
pronounce it.
Yeah.
And Henry Cavill was up for that part.
Did not know that.
Henry Cavill was up for that role, but it went to Brandon Routh.
And I think many of us have already concluded that the best part of that movie was in the trailer. When the bullet hits the Superman's eyeball and bounces
Oh
off.
gosh.
That was pretty
And
awesome.
they ruined
was
it
sweet.
in the trailer. I mean,
So that movie gets a lot of flack, and some Superman fans just kind of ignore it like it doesn't exist. Kind of like the way when I watch the Star Wars prequels, I have to ignore Jar Jar and just pretend that he doesn't even exist. But anyway, that's another story for another day. And then lastly on our Fast Facts, a musical genius, Hans Zimmer, writes another brilliant soundtrack. He's following up at this point on his work from the Dark Knight trilogy, working with Christopher Nolan. And I know Preston has a lot that he wants to share about the music. So you go right ahead, Preston, if you want to.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll
Can
try
hit some
not to
highlights,
keep
do
it
whatever you
too
wanna do.
lengthy, but yeah, some of the highlights of the music, and we can always dive a little bit deeper later on. But for Hans Zimmer did do the music for Man of Steel, and this was his. If I researched it right, this was his first collaboration with Zack Snyder. And I think one of the things that influenced his being able to assume the part of composer for the movie was previously having worked with Christopher Nolan, because Nolan did produce Man of Steel.
And these are some large shoes to fill, because didn't John Williams do the original Superman
Yeah.
theme that was so immortalized?
That's exactly
Yeah,
right.
I mean, how do you follow that up?
Well, and that was a overwhelming feeling that Hans Zimmer experienced when he was offered the part. He actually almost turned it down simply because he felt that standing on the shoulders of John Williams and trying to fill those shoes was such an impossible thing to do.
Yeah.
And it took him sitting down with Zack Snyder and finding out what the story this time around was going to be. And once he got those ideas from Snyder and he found out from him how they were going to be making this movie and how it was going to be different, then all of a sudden Zimmer just started getting all these really cool ideas. And that's why the music really follows along with how the story is, of how it's all about a lot of it's about the American heartland. And Hans Zimmer wanted the music to be reflective of that feeling of growing up in the American heartland, of celebrating America, and how growing up in being given a good home can inspire you to grow up to do good things and be a symbol of hope, like Superman is.
Sweet. So if you haven't listened to the Hans Zimmer soundtrack, you can probably find it on YouTube. There's probably a version on there you can listen.
And I'll put a
Obviously,
link to
there
it on our
are other
description.
ways you can get it, Amazon and iTunes. It's on my phone right now, actually. I was riding around listening to it. It's awesome. So I'm sure we will get more into the soundtrack as we continue. You guys got any other comments, anything you want to chime in on before we move to our next segment?
I'm good.
Good.
Well, there was just one thing, and you mentioned this, Preston. I didn't know Christopher Nolan had anything to do with this. When I was doing my research and everything, and it said Christopher Nolan producer, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow, really?
Which would make sense because he rebooted the DC
Yeah.
universe,
Yeah.
and he really changed the game with reinventing Batman and bringing it more into a realistic world.
Yeah. And I thought it was cool that he helped produce it after watching a ton of his movies, and I was like, yeah, this kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
Well, they were trying to get some of that magic that he rubbed off, hoping to. Well, it apparently did.
Of course.
Yeah.
So let's move on and talk about significant departures from Superman lore. Because if you know anything about Man of Steel, it is divisive. It has really drawn a line in the sand among fans. You either love it or you hate it. There really isn't much of a middle ground here. And everything about this movie, I think, has been nitpicked, criticized. I've seen entire videos, blogs. People are very passionate about this movie one way or the other. Everything from just the whole story, how it departs, even the way it was filmed. I mean, there are some people who hate it because Zack Snyder uses a shaky cam a lot, in the same way that J.J. Abrams loves his lens flares.
one of the biggest things I remember hearing about when it first came out was people hated how much destruction
Yeah.
was in it. I'm like, that's part of Superman. Especially if you read the comics, there's so much destruction in all the
I don't
comics.
I mean, you have
and I don't understand that.
these Kryptonians, their atomic density, their powers, all of that stuff, they drink our sun's radiation to become more powerful.
Yeah.
And A-10s using miniguns on them and they bounce right off. I mean, that makes sense to me that they could be very destructive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how you could make the movie without some bit of destruction and chaos. I mean, we all love the eye candy, right? I mean,
it's not like Superman saying, "Hey, Zod, let's go 20 miles out of town and battle in this field over here."
Exactly.
Not downtown though.
Like it has to be set in a DC Universe city.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you know, Zod and Superman have to fly through the Wayne building
Yeah.
to incite another movie, which we'll talk of later.
All right.
Ah.
Doug,
So, what
that
are
is
some
deep.
of the significant departures? Well, I've got a list here, and I'm sure these guys have got some other things they want to add to it. First off, let's talk about costume changes. In Man of Steel, believe it or not, this is the first occasion where Superman doesn't have any red trunks. Dun, dun, dun. Which you wouldn't think would be a big deal, but some people hate it. The S shield. In the comics, we know it means House of El. There's a slight reinterpretation in the movie. Not only does it mean House of El, but it means hope. And so the hope is a huge theme throughout the whole movie that the Zack Snyder plays on, where Superman is a beacon of hope, not only for Krypton, but for humanity, and also for each of us, that we can strive to live out those ideals of compassion and sacrifice and all those things that Superman stands for. So there's those kind of small things. How about this? Doug, you referenced it. Lois Lane and Superman relationship reversed.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so talk about it.
Well, in the comics, you know, Clark, or Superman or Clark, you know, he gets a job as a reporter. I mean, they pull on that thread. He said he wants to find a job where he can go places that nobody would ask questions if it's dangerous. And that's where he meets Lois as a reporter. She don't find out he's Superman until much later.
Years and years later.
Yes.
Yeah.
But right away, they get it out. She knows right away.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things they changed. I thought was pretty interesting in it. But I mean,
And the love interest is right there.
Yeah.
From the very, very soon in the movie, at least halfway through the movie.
I mean, and I know, way I've read in the comics that Lois wasn't that, she didn't have that any kind of thing for Clark at all.
Right.
And he purposely acted goofy and clumsy, you know, around her. So I like the way they done it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with the way they pulled it off in the movie.
No, not at all. Well, another thing that they kind of changed a little bit was, and they actually did it in the Christopher Reeves movies as well, but they killed Jonathan Kent off as well.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about that. That's a really divisive
That's
thing.
a big one there.
Yeah.
Well, see, because even in the comics, neither one of his parents died for, 70 years.
Yeah, he went back and visited them. They were very old.
Did not know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So that was one thing they did in the Christopher Reeves movies and also in this. And so, but
Let me give you a little something I noticed in rewatching this movie. You know the key that
The codex?
the little key, the S key.
Okay, yeah.
Did you notice when they were looking at it, when Lois was looking at it, it's black and silver. The S is silver. Preston knows where I'm going
I know
with
where
this.
you're going, Doug.
Fill in the plebeians out here.
Yes.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Well, that's a direct reference to Superman's death and resurrection. He comes back in a black suit, which Zod has a black suit on. His suit's black. And the S, or his hope symbol, is silver. So when he's resurrected, which is what we're going to see in the Snyder Cut, hopefully, fingers crossed.
And even Zod's symbol is a different characterization. It doesn't have that S look to it.
No. It's for a different house.
Like,
altogether.
like different
family
houses.
crest.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that was one cool thing that we got to see when they spent so much time on Krypton, is you got to see the hierarchy of this society and how they were ordered, and there were different classes and clans and families, and you see how the organization of the society was put together and how
Everyone's engineered a certain.
that was a real part of the destruction of the society as well.
Well, and another thing especially with Zod, I think I talked about this with you guys a little bit last time, but with Zod, he actually wasn't even he made his first appearance in the Christopher Reeves movies. He wasn't even in the comics until the mid 2000s.
So who played Zod in the original movie?
It was Terrence Stamp. He was the actor that played
so
Zod
forgettable
in the one who he was the kneel before Zod.
Yeah.
You know
we
that's
all
Terrence
remember
Stamp.
Gene Wilder, right, in his role as Lex Luthor.
Yep.
Gene
Gene
Hackman.
Hackman. I'm sorry, not Willy Wonka.
I was thinking Gene Wilder. I don't know.
That kind of would have been better.
Now that you say that, Derek,
That would be interesting.
I would really be interested. I really think Gene Wilder would make an excellent, or would have made an excellent Lex Luthor. Oh my
Man,
gosh,
I
that's
keep
now.
inserting my foot in my mouth, but
No, that's actually you
That's
just
good.
sparked a new level of thinking. I mean,
Maybe
that's
there's
almost
a deep
like
fake in the future.
yeah, there you go.
I mean, that's almost like saying,
As long as they don't
What-
bring Oompa Loompas.
"What do you get?" when
That's
you
his
guzzle
army.
down
That's his
kryptonite?"
army in the background. I love the Oompa Loompas.
Speaking,
That's almost like saying, "What if Mozart had lived past the age of 35?" You know,
Yeah.
what could have wrought from that type of labor? That's what I think when I'm like, "What if Gene Wilder had played Lex Luthor?"
another good point you brought up, Preston. Man of Steel. There is no kryptonite in that movie.
I was getting ready to talk about
was
that.
you?
Go
Oh,
ahead,
let me
Doug.
steer
Go
your
on with
thunder,
it,
man.
bro.
Yeah,
Go
Doug.
on now. You don't need me.
Doug, you open the can.
Well, actually, you did, Preston.
Oh.
You said kryptonite first. I just
I
jumped
got
on
you.
it.
So in this one, it's right the atmosphere, the difference in the atmosphere between Earth and Krypton. That's kind of the thing that makes him weak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They institute that to make you think that's the weak point of it. Like he's got used to Earth's atmosphere. They're not. But then again, in the next movie,
Batman vs Superman.
they introduce the stone kryptonite, which is pieces of his home planet. So it's really cool. There's a lot of forward thinking. They omit certain things in a new movie to purposely bring it in the next one.
And which, by the way, if you plan on seeing Batman vs Superman, or you have seen it and you hate it, please watch the extended cut. It
Yes.
makes it
It's way
way
better.
better.
The Ultimate
Yeah.
Edition
Oh, yeah.
is
Oh, yeah.
Without
way-
question.
Well, let me tell you this about, since you guys mentioned kryptonite.
See?
I was actually doing a little bit of research, and I stumbled onto this that they actually didn't introduce kryptonite for a few issues after his first appearance. I think from what I read, I think it was a good 10 issues.
Talking about Action Comics way back in the day.
Way back in the day. It was a good 10 issues before they even introduced kryptonite. So that's kind of cool how they did that for the movie, I guess.
So one thing that I think they invented for the movie, you guys can correct me, but it's the codex, which has all the genetic line of the Kryptonians.
Yeah, because I don't even think they mention anything
That
about
gets
that.
passed on it actually gets inscribed into the
DNA.
of Kal-El. And so they use that as a device to bring Zod and Kal-El into collision with each other, which is something that they invented. They didn't get that from the comics, right?
No.
No,
that
the
was
codex
purely
just-
movie thing.
Just completely invented for the movie.
When the whole
I thought it was cool.
with the whole DNA thing becoming so much more a norm in our culture, as far as using it for forensics, using it to track family history, using it to determine health traits for quality of life. I can see why we get to 2013 and then in a Superman movie now they're involving DNA in the movie, just kind of a way to make it more relevant to a modern audience.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
I mean,
think
Go ahead.
we'll just keep walking all over each
Yeah.
other. You think even with they consider the Kryptonians a society that's reached a certain level with technology, and so you would automatically think, oh, well, they would know all about DNA and how to enhance DNA. Well, when we find out in this movie, they have and do. That's how they breed their entire society. You know what you're going to be when you're born.
Yeah.
So we're going to save the last two can of worms here.
Oh,
All right, we've already mentioned it a little bit. The death of Jonathan Kent. This has been probably one of the biggest divisive things about this movie. And I know where Doug falls on this, so we'll let him open it up. Nathan, you may have a different opinion. I haven't heard yours yet, but of course in the comics and in previous adaptations of Jonathan Kent, usually he dies from natural causes, right?
Yeah,
He has a heart attack or
Yeah.
he gets sick or whatever.
Yeah, even in the comics, the heart attack was like a major story
So
during the death of
the
Superman.
big sticking point of that is that Clark Kent, Kal-El, realizes I can't save everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, well, and the way Snyder did in this movie, which the way they portray his father, and his father's trying to teach him, wants him to stay hidden until he can be sure he'll be
Time.
safe. Yeah.
Yes.
So he can decide if he wants to stand proudly in front of the human race and say, here, I'm here to help you. And the fact that his dad had to tell him, hey, I know you could come right over here and save me the way he died in a hurricane. It was a tornado.
Tornado, yeah.
And he told him, nope, you stay over there with your mom. I mean,
He was sacrificed himself to keep his secret.
yeah.
Like, I know people are really divided on this, and they passionately hate the way that Jonathan Kent was portrayed in the tornado scene. But really, if he dies by a heart attack, that doesn't really add anything to the character. Whereas I think what I like that Snyder did was this was a sacrificing thing, and it was teaching him a very important lesson.
Especially right after they just had a fight.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was thinking about, like the concept of self-sacrifice and Clark seeing that right there before his very eyes, where in his case, he could have easily, at the blink of an eye, saved him, brought him back. He would have been totally fine. And like you said, Derrick, where he puts his hand out, no. It was that combination of the world's not ready to find out about you yet, and at the same time, I'm willing I'm willing for this lesson to be learned at the expense of my own life, and
And it was necessary for creating the man,
right,
Clark Kent.
and it
That had to happen to
Yeah.
help define him and help him get to that point.
Well, he knows he's going to have to sacrifice one part of himself or another.
Right. I mean, I understand people's criticism of it. Like, I get it, but I actually think I'm of the camp that thinks this is a stronger way to portray the character.
much stronger. I mean, I get it with the heart attack story thread, like what we saw in the Christopher Reeve movie, and in the scene where they're burying him, he talks about all those powers and I couldn't save him. And yeah, you could easily make the argument that right there can have a huge influence on how a superhero develops and how they come to be. But the way they did it with Kevin Costner's version, I agree too, is such a
It's powerful.
it's
hits you.
very
It's a gut punch.
powerful.
Like, there are lots of moments in this movie where we'll get misty-eyed there. I'm not gonna be shameful of that.
Yeah.
It definitely has some emotional punch, which I think plays into the success of the movie.
Well, yeah, especially that scene where he just, after the tornado takes him, and Henry Cavill just screams. No, what does he say? No, or
I
just
think
screams?
he says "Dad."
It's a painful cry as it is at the end of the movie when he has to take Zod's
Oh
life,
yeah.
Oh,
which we'll get to now.
Yes.
So this is the
Segue.
big one.
Yeah.
Left
Big
turn.
one. So at the end of the movie, Man of Steel is faced with a choice, and he has to take Zod's life, which, if you know anything about the character of Superman, his code is he doesn't take life. And yet he's put in a situation here at the end of the movie where it's an impasse. He has to break the neck of General Zod. And a lot of people hated this. Doug, you may be one of them.
While
Doesn't even know where to begin.
well. Oh, go ahead, Preston. What you
well,
gonna
I
say?
was going to say, while your gears are turning, and again, Nathan, you and Doug, I see as the comic book wisdom here, but I came across some articles after we saw Man of Steel when it came out, and I remember seeing the stuff that Derrick brought up, how there was a lot of back and forth about Superman killing Zod, using lethal force to alleviate the situation. But I had actually read that there were some people online saying that was actually, in a sense, true to the comic book, where now with Batman, yeah, his code is do not kill under any circumstance. But how in Superman's case, it was a case of I'm backed into a corner, and when Superman's backed into a corner like that, then he will respond with deadly force. I mean,
Doug is not sold.
Now, what got me, and then Doug, you chime in, but what got me thinking, and I know there may not have been the direct use of him doing this, but like in Superman 2, when he's fighting Zod and the other Kryptonians, Ursa and all of them, in a sense, he uses deadly force on them. Now their powers are taken away and they fall down the ice.
And he lets them die.
He allows them.
He just like,
Man.
I'm gonna step back.
Is there a line cross when
Let
they
him
did
talk,
it to
let
their
him talk.
when they
Yeah,
did it
so-
to their self as opposed to him actually
Yeah.
cracking somebody's neck?
So Doug, you come in and you fill in those gaps that I put in.
Okay. My era. I'm the old guy here.
Doug is a 75 model.
Superman, that was, and I grew up with all the Christopher Reeve movies. Yes. I even got an Atari on Christmas. Thank you very much. I unwrapped an Atari.
What is Atari?
It's a 2600. You know.
I only know Nintendo.
Anyway, that's another story.
Go ahead, Doug. Go ahead.
And, that was the one thing he did. Superman was always a force for good, and he'd always use his powers against evil, but he would always bring them to justice. Now, saying that, it's not, he would always figure out a way to either they would hang themselves metaphorically, he would give them enough, he'd figure out a problem to solve to where they would essentially get themselves arrested, or self thrown in jail, or he would drop them off himself. So it shocked me at the end of when we saw that movie. That was one of the things we talked about.
Yeah, we talked
directly
a lot about
after.
that.
Is when I got the way they put him in a situation where he had to stop Zod, because Zod said he wasn't going to stop, and he was about to kill that whole family. I understand that. But at the same time, I think he could have flew straight up with him.
There was another way.
There was another way.
I just don't feel like it would have been as dramatic. May not be the right
I think
word.
they were going for the
You know-
emotional punch.
Well,
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
kind of like the bedboard analogy from Titanic.
Yeah. There was enough
There
room
was
on
enough
there for
room.
Jack.
He could have flown up. Jack could have mounted on the bedboard.
Honey, they brought Titanic into this, and you're listening to this. It wasn't me. This is a discussion we have at home about. That's her favorite movie of all time. Anyway.
Cue Celine Dion.
That was Doug's passive shout out to his spouse.
And so the fact that he did that, it said something about where Zack Snyder wanted this Superman to be. Like, you never want to cross him or put him in a point where he's going to have to choose. And more I've processed it in the years since I watched it, I can see, especially seeing more of Zack Snyder's stuff, he's definitely got a little more edge to the way he does it, which I like.
There was definitely a darkening of Superman, if you want to use that terminology in this Snyderverse version.
Well, let me say this. With my research I was doing, and I even kind of researched the whole him killing people, even in the comics, it was a pretty much 99.9999% chance that he didn't kill anybody except for only pretty much one person, unless it was an alternate reality. There's always these alternate reality stories where he's killed people. But in the main storyline, Doomsday was the I mean, granted, they did kill each other, but
Here goes Doug.
Doug has his finger
Here
pointed
comes
up.
Doug, Nathan.
He's objecting.
Well, okay.
but I'm not saying it's like he just killed him. Like you know what I'm saying, though, right?
He had to kill him.
He had to kill him.
Or he was going to kill him. This is
that's-
the same scenario.
Yeah.
Okay, and another thing, the way Zack Snyder was approaching these movies, they used Zod's body
To make Doomsday.
to make Doomsday.
Yeah. In the next
So you think about this, okay? Yeah.
I didn't like it.
You go down to what? What?
Uh-oh.
I didn't like them.
Okay.
that Doomsday.
That's another movie.
In the comics, he was an engineered being off Krypton. Right, correct?
Yes.
Correct? So you didn't like the fact that if he wouldn't have done it the way they did, how was they going to explain him getting to this planet?
But he wasn't a
Because the planet blew up.
10-foot giant mindless beast.
You will each have 5 minutes,
Yeah.
followed by a.
This is the Bane
Don't-
conversation we keep having.
Don't
And the
make
fact that he
Preston
started out with
mute
no
your
bones.
mic.
He had no bones when he started out.
I am holding the sliders,
For another podcast.
Yes.
Okay.
but this is good, deep stuff. I like it.
Right. So, and that leads us to our break. And when we come back from our break, we're going to discuss some of the theological themes and some of the deeper meaning that we saw in the movie. So, stay tuned.
All right, everybody. Us kids who were born in the 80s and raised in the 90s, except for Doug, are back from our break here. So we're going to continue our discussion around Man of Steel and bringing you some of the deeper connotations when it comes to the theological aspects of the movie. So, Derrick, I'm going to give you the floor and see where it goes from there.
All right, so first topic that we want to dive into here is what I've called Superman, Jesus, and Moses. Now, as you watch the movie, I think Zack Snyder went out of his way to make those connections between Christ and Superman. In fact, I would say it's probably the most overt, heavy-handed approach I've ever seen in a superhero flick. So there were certainly visual cues along the way that hinted at that. I'm wondering which ones were most impactful to you guys, or which ones did you notice immediately?
Now, the Moses one.
Let's start with just Jesus,
Oh,
and then
gotcha.
we'll move to Moses here in a second.
Gotcha. So on the Jesus part, I know for me a big part of the symbolism was where Jor-El says to him, "You can save all of them."
Mm-hmm.
And then when he's exiting the spacecraft, he's in the position of his arms.
The crucifix.
Exactly. So that was a big one. And Doug, I can tell you've got something, so you go right ahead.
I was getting into the conversation. One of the biggest ones for me, which they did in the movie, which I really liked, right after they find out about Superman being on the planet, where's he go? He goes to the church and talks to the pastor. I love that they put that in there.
And in that scene, if I remember correctly, there's a positioning where there's a stained glass Jesus in the background.
Right behind
Looks
him.
like it's the prayer in Garden of Gethsemane. And it's right behind Clark Kent in that moment when he's having his own Gethsemane moment about should I come forward and all of that.
Well, you could also say that maybe that's how he was raised as well. Maybe he was raised as a Christian.
Yeah, so you kind of get the sense that that was his local church or their local parish, and he went there to seek counsel from their pastor.
Yeah.
So those are definitely like visual cues that the director is wanting you to see the connections that he's trying to portray there.
I mean, the most obvious one was the Father sent the Son to save everyone.
Right. Yeah. So you have Jor-El, the father sends his only son, Kal-El, Jor-El says on Krypton as they're discussing he and the wife about how is he going to fit in on Earth. He says, well, he'll be a god to them. I don't know if you guys remember that part.
Yeah.
His body will soak in their radiation. And so there's a clear parallel there to me to John 3:16, probably the most well-known verse in all the Bible. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. So there's all kinds of incarnation overtones as well, because you see Kal-El on Earth as a human struggling to find his identity. He works these odd jobs trying to fit in and trying to hide also. So he's the fisherman on the boat in the beginning of the movie. He's the
Bus boy.
in the restaurant, kind of fitting in, of course, with the same Jesus motif where Jesus spends his first 30 years of his life serving working in the carpenter shop.
Yeah, and he's that helper. I guess at the campsite,
Right.
up there, up north, and
Right.
Yeah.
So you definitely get the theme of veiled power, somebody who's incredibly powerful and extraordinary, but yet living a very ordinary, mundane life.
the fact he's on a journey too.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's
And,
trying to discover
another
himself.
thing that I noticed last time I rewatched it, the idea of two fathers. So Superman has two dads. He has his Kryptonian dad, Jor-El, and then he has his earthly dad, Jonathan, a close parallel to Christ, who has the heavenly father, and then Joseph, the earthly father,
Right.
as well. Now, there's several moments in the movie where we see Superman struggling with his humanity, and this is really something that I think Zack Snyder brought to the forefront in this movie, is that really this is dealing with an identity issue deep in Superman's psyche. Like, he's trying to find his place. Where does he belong? Who is he? Why is he here? And you could make some of those connections with Jesus as well. So early on, we see that Superman is rejected as a youngster. He's rejected by the students in his class. He's seen as a freak.
He's extremely bullied.
Right.
Yep.
There's a couple of scenes there where the bullies pick on him on the bus.
On the bus.
And then later on, they pick on him and they are trying to goad him into fighting, and he doesn't. He restrains himself.
And he still saves them on that bus, even though he still got bullied.
Right. So you could see the connection there to Jesus. The Bible says in John 1:11 that Jesus came into his own, and his own received him not. So, I mean, he was so beloved by the Jewish people that they killed him. So you could see the same rejection motif there. What about that self-restraint? Let's talk about that for a second. So against the bullies, he could obviously squash them, and he doesn't.
I think maybe he's also afraid, maybe out of anger, like how far he would take it. Like that's how he's just afraid how far it would go. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And a part of that too, and I'm speaking as a teacher, part of it could also be that is his restraint could be a product of his upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
Because
that's the whole thing with his dad, Jonathan Kent, is he's telling him, look, it's not, the world's not ready yet. You're not ready yet. When you come out in the world, everything's going to change.
Well, in that one scene where the guy's trying to get him to fight, and he's up against the fence.
Yeah.
And they leave him alone. When they see his dad, Jonathan walks over, and Clark's like, I wanted to hit him so bad.
Mm-hmm.
He looks at him and says, well, would it made you feel any better?
Yeah. So there's that one exception in the bar where the yokel dumps all the beer on top of him, and then the next scene it cuts to his truck and he's made it into a smoldering pile. He's taking the logs and
it's shoved.
That's
through
a
it.
great scene.
It's like
Impaled the truck.
It's like pixie stick stuck in there.
So, and probably one of the most overt scenes of restraint, I guess, would be the moment where they put the handcuffs on Superman. He allows himself to be arrested.
Wouldn't be
And
much
they make
of a
big joke
surrender.
about that.
And he just gets up and clink.
snap.
Yeah,
Like,
so
okay,
obviously there's the Christological connection there. You could say Jesus, of course, allowed himself to be arrested, allowed himself to be beaten and crucified. In the Gospels, he makes mention of the fact that He could have called 10,000 of the angels to come and take him down from the cross. One of the charges from the people at making fun or jesting at the cross is that, hey, if you're really God, why don't you come down from there? And yet he restrains himself.
Yeah.
Matthew 26:53 is a good scripture reference for that, where Jesus mentions the angels. So you see the connection there where Superman is restraining his power, and of course Jesus. The theological way we would express is Jesus willingly laid aside the independent use of all of his divine attributes. So he didn't fully exercise everything within his ability, even though he could have, and it would have been his prerogative, and he would have been justified in doing it. He doesn't, as he's veiled in the flesh.
When you're talking about him when Clark's journey, I thought that was a real good scene they did after he saved all the guys on the oil rig and it blew up. Mm-hmm. And he's down underwater, and he's floating with his arms out, and he's just thinking back to everything he's went through, all his lessons, and I just thought that was a real good. You could really see the torment, stuff he's going through. He's trying to figure himself out.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting connection that they make there. When we think of Superman, you think, well, nothing can hurt him. But yet, when you get into his psyche, you see that all those years of rejection, like, they do hurt him.
Yeah,
he does
he's
care.
Still mentally human.
Yes.
And to me, that kind of connects with how when Christ came to this earth,
obviously,
he experienced the same things that we do. He went through those things, and partly so that he could understand us as God's children, and also because he was made in that way. He was made to be able to internally feel those same things that we do, just like how y'all described from the movie, where again Clark is going through those internal conflicts that any child at school or wherever could be going through based on what's going on around him.
Now, there is one big divergent point in the movie where I see that the Christ connection isn't completely applicable. So in the movie, Superman has to discover his purpose, and then he has to, once he knows his purpose, he has to choose how he's going to use his power. That's the whole struggle of the movie. Whereas Christ, obviously, when he comes to earth, he knows why he came.
Right.
He knows that he's come to die. Luke 19:10, I've come to seek and save that which is lost. I've come to do the will of the Father, he says. So there is a huge diverging point there, I would say, where we could see a contrast between the two.
It's interesting you bring that up, the fact where he has to decide what he's going to do with his powers, and the way Zack Snyder does it with Superman, when you find out, is that his dad, Jor-El, really, if he would have chose, he could have killed everybody on the planet and started all over. That's why he gave him the Kryptonian's DNA. You remember that?
Did not know that.
Yeah, he remember he went back and asked him, was that true?
Yes.
And
yeah, that's right.
And before that's when he got off the ship. That was the last time he talked to him. And he told him, because after Zod told him the foundation's got to be built on something.
Right.
So he could have completely took over that. It was his choice.
So that's kind of a moment of temptation, right? Or a testing moment where Zod comes to Kal-El and basically presents him with a choice like, hey, join me or die. And if you join me, it's kind of like the Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker moment. Join me and we can, rule the galaxy together.
We'll rule the galaxy together.
Pretty much any evil guy that finds another powerful person, join me.
Unlimited power.
So it's yeah.
You always got to bring the prequels in.
You could make a parallel there to the temptation of Christ in the wilderness. He's being tempted by Satan. And one of the temptations there is to use your power in a self-serving way, which is what Zod is really tempting Superman to do.
There you go.
As well. Use your power to, we can rebuild Krypton and we can rule it together.
Yeah.
Bring our people back.
Yeah, one of the temptations in the wilderness with Jesus is, hey, take these stones and turn them into bread. Use it for yourself. And, of course, when you study the Gospels, you see that Jesus never did a miracle to enhance himself or serve himself. He was always doing it to serve somebody else.
Yeah.
Or to do one on command.
Right. It wasn't a magic trick or a parlor trick or something like that. It always had a purpose and a reason. So there's a little bit more parallel between Christ and Superman. Now, there's also another interpretation that you could take, and that is Moses. I know that Snyder was going for the Christ connection, but there is a definite darkening of Superman in this movie, intentionally, I would say, done by the director, where to make Superman more relatable, to bring him more down to our level where he's struggling to figure out who he is, he's wanting to fit in, how to use his power. So if you don't like the Christ fit, you could also use Moses as an analogy there. So if you remember in the book of Exodus, Moses is the baby sent in the basket. He's a slave. He's born a slave, and he's put in the basket, and he's sent down the Nile River. He's discovered by the royal Egyptian family. He's raised in the home of Pharaoh. He discovers his real identity later on, and then God calls him at the burning bush scene to be the deliverer, and he goes back to rescue his people, deliver them from slavery through miraculous signs and wonders. You could also adopt that same Moses feel for Kal-El, because he's put not in a basket but in a spaceship.
Uh-huh.
He's sent across an ocean of stars, which is mentioned by Zod in the film. He's raised by another family. He discovers his identity. He delivers humanity through feats of strength, or miraculous signs, if you will. And then, of course, Moses was just a man. He was flawed. He was conflicted. He even took a life, just like Superman has to do. He has to take life. So there's association there. If you wanted to use the Moses, I actually kind of like the Moses track, because you have the struggle with identity and you have room for the flaws, which is kind of the picture that we're given of Kal-El in the movie, the flawed character. What do you think?
Yeah,
you can disagree.
I would agree. No. I agree with that.
I give you permission.
Doug, you did have that disagreeing face.
That's just my face.
You need a new face.
This is a prerequisite to how ugly our Star Wars podcast is going to be.
Oh,
This is radio, not TV, people.
World War III, guys.
So, you think about that. I was, as you were talking, I was thinking back of some of the points I didn't get to bring up where they differ. The movie differed from the comics. It veered off. Well, another little deep cut, the girl on the bus that looks back, and that's Lana. That ends up being Superman's high school girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And
Is that a Smallville thing?
It's a comic
it's
thing.
a comic book,
Okay.
but yeah, they really went there in the comic book. It fills in that gap. Another thing, when you talk about how Jor-El sent his son Cal, and he come through a wormhole.
Mm-hmm.
When he got into our universe, he was still a baby. In the comic book, he aged. When he landed, he was probably about 8 or 9.
Really?
Yeah. Because you can actually go back and read, the first Action comic, which I can't even touch one of them comic books, but you can digitally go back and look at it.
I got some story on number 1, by the way.
He goes up, and Martha and Ken are changing a tire, and after they find him, and he picks up the truck. That's like one of the nice little visuals they did, and they realize, oh, this kid's different.
There's something different about you. I can't put my finger on it.
It's not because we found you in this meteorite, but you can pick up this truck. But I thought that was interesting. We got talking about interstellar wormhole. He sent him through a stable wormhole.
There you go.
Interesting.
You got something? You were saying you had deep story on Action Comic 1.
Lay it out there, man. Come on.
Better say it now.
Well, okay. It's actually about the comic itself. Recently, apparently, somebody bought a graded issue, and when I say graded, it means somebody is, looked through it, make sure how everything looks, and then they put a grade on, like a 1 to 10. Mm-hmm. Well, recently, it sold for $3.2 million because apparently it was a grade of 8.
Nice and minty.
Minty. And they said it actually still had white pages. It was so mint.
Is this like a 1 to 10 scale?
Yeah, it's a
Is
1
that-
to 10
okay.
scale. Yeah, and they go by like halves or whatever.
And it's hard to get a comic that grades anything above a 7 to 10.
Yeah.
If you get anything, you hardly ever see a 10.
And
It's
you
like
also gotta
grading a
think
diamond.
this is an 80-year-old comic, and I also found out that they made 200,000 copies, but now there's only about 100 or so copies left that survived.
Wow.
After 80 years.
I'd like to find one.
And you guys are really going to enjoy this one. The last copy that sold, it sold for $2.1 million. And you never believe who bought it.
Jeff Bezos,
Bill Gates,
No.
Mark Cuban.
No.
Tim Cook.
Nicolas Cage.
No way. Oh,
Who
that
was slated at one time to be Superman?
That
Yes.
makes. I was about to say that makes all.
Go look at the test footage, people.
mean,
it's strange.
It's on the internet.
For the
Yes.
four of us to have grown up through the 90s, through the 80s and 90s.
Speak for yourself.
There, I'm including you in this, Doug. That should make perfect sense to all of us
Wow.
why Nicolas Cage
Yeah.
bought that.
That
Now,
is cool.
that
Ghost Rider
absolutely
bought
blows
Action
me-
Comics #1.
That completely blows me away, but at the same time, it is not surprising.
And well, see, they also said that the guy that bought it for it sold for $3.2 million. They said they're also donating 1% of the sales to a foundation for spinal cord injury and what is it?
Was that Christopher Reeve's foundation?
Yes, it was his.
Oh,
yeah.
paralysis.
Paralysis. Yeah,
some
sorry, I
kind
couldn't
of
say that word.
paralysis.
Yeah, so they're donating
Wow.
1% of that funds to that. I just thought that
cool.
was a little cool.
That is cool.
That is cool.
a nice diversion.
Especially the Nicolas Cage.
Any of y'all that didn't know, Christopher Reeves, he got hurt in a horseback riding incident.
Yeah, I remember being in middle school when that happened. That was around middle school, and then I remember it was around my sophomore or junior year at Baylor when he had passed away.
Yep.
Because the day it was announced in marching band, we actually ended the rehearsal doing the John Williams fanfare theme, just that introduction, the dun da 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 dun dun,
Yeah.
and that's how we ended rehearsal. But it was a way to
was nice,
pay
Preston.
tribute. Well, thank you, Doug. And I'm not a vocalist. I'm actually an instrumentalist.
sure about that, Preston?
How about that?
You fooled me.
And that was actually, we would always blast that phrase every now and then at football games. It was just the Superman theme, and the marching band had done that for years, but we did that as a tribute to him the day that it was announced.
So, let's move on to the next little topic, and it is overcoming fear with faith and hope. So, as I watched the movie, one thing that occurred to me was the basic hurdle in Man of Steel is that Superman has to wrestle with the fear of rejection. He's afraid, especially Jonathan Kent is afraid, and maybe this is transferred onto young Clark Kent, that the world will not accept him as an alien, as an outsider. They will fear him because of his great power. And when the world finds out about who Superman really is, it's going to change everything, the understanding of science and their place in the universe and all of that good stuff. And that's a very primal fear for everybody. We all have the fear of rejection. And we think, if the world really knows about my past or about my flaws or about what was done to me or where I come from or whatever, that they won't accept me. And so often we give in to that fear. We tend to slink back into the shadows and hide in obscurity. And for that reason, we don't realize the true purpose for which we were created. We don't reach our potential because of that fear of rejection. What do y'all think about that?
Oh, absolutely. And as someone who teaches music and performs music, the fear of rejection is something that haunts every one of us that works in the music field, because a lot of what we do has to do with the kind of the audition process and stuff. And I know it's like, how does that compare to saving the world? It may not compare in that way, but the way that it does compare is being accepted, doing something successful through the audition type of process is where our success comes from. It's where our acceptance may come from, and that could be something as simple as just the acceptance into a certain job or a certain position, or even into just a certain type of group. The same could be said for being accepted or rejected by a group of friends. Is my passion for Star Trek going to cause me to be rejected or accepted by this group? That was something that I struggled a lot with as a child. And
all nerds deal with the fear of rejection. If they knew that I liked action figures, or if they knew that I played video games, or that I wasn't athletic, or whatever, we all coming up have the fear of rejection, and it carries on into adulthood.
Oh yes.
Well, the funny thing is, that's actually a perfect example, especially with Stacy. Because guys, you don't know this, but I work with Stacy, and
shout out to Stacy Robinson.
Stacy Robinson.
He's our bass guitar player at church.
It was so funny because he didn't realize I collected toys, and he loves G.I. Joes, and he collects G.I. Joes.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, "Man, if I'd known you collected toys, I would have talked about it more."
And that's something, Nathan, that I come across a lot with many other people as well. It's that revelation of, oh, you like this too. We could have talked about this so much more if I knew that.
We are inbuilt with that as fallen humans, that there are only certain parts of ourselves we're willing to reveal to people. And it happens in degrees as we get closer to them. But we all deal with that. If we are standoffish, and I'm not going to let you into this little part of my life until I know that if I do, you won't judge me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all
affirmation.
deal with that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I felt like that was a very primal thing that Superman dealt with in a reverse kind of way. He was the outcast, but not from a deficiency, but from just the incredible power and the burden that he had that went along with that.
Well, another perfect example of people with powers wanting to hide everything, it's just like the X-Men. The X-Men mutants, they're all trying to hide everything. They don't want people to know, because when people do find out, they want to, enslave them or try to control them, whatever, and they want to try to pass laws. And so I think that's another thing that, he was just worried about. Like, he didn't want to reveal himself too quick.
Being seen as a, quote, like a freak of nature.
Exactly.
Type of thing.
That's the whole Beast Mystique motif.
Yeah.
Beast wanted to hide himself being that way, and Mystique she could mimic anyone. So she never had to look like she did naturally.
There you go. That's nice.
The real
connection.
Raven.
So here's what I saw that really paralleled, I thought, with Christian doctrine. So Kal-El, Superman, overcomes his fear of rejection when he encounters his father, Jor-El, in the spaceship, where he encounters his origin story, the reason why he was sent to Earth, that he's to be the bridge between two worlds, to be a beacon of hope, and so on. And you get that same motif play out in the Moses character arc in the book of Exodus. So Moses, when he goes to the burning bush, he encounters his heavenly Father. He encounters God, his source of life. And he even explains to God why you can't use me. I have a stuttering problem and I'm weak, and if they will reject me. It's the same thing. But God, overwhelms him with his holiness and his love and the purpose that he has for his life, that he's been destined for something great. And so there's that little part of all of us that's broken, that little part of all of us that is in fear of rejection. And really the only way that's fixed in Christian doctrine is you come in contact with your Creator. And he helps you to understand the purpose for which you were made, and he gives you the strength and the courage to rise up and to live up to that potential for which you've been called and for which you've been sent. So I really identified with that, and I thought that was a very interesting way to bring that out in Superman, because immediately after that scene where he meets Jor-El in the spaceship, the very next scene is him flying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? Where he now has the confidence to test himself and to push himself to the limit, and you kind of get the birth really of Superman proper, because
he gets a couple big jumps.
He gets the costume and then he flies.
Speaking of which, Doug, I heard that the way he jumped was actually a nod to how the comics were originally written, because
Able to leap tall
leap a
buildings
tall
with a
building.
single bound.
Well, not just that, but my understanding, what I found out was that when the comics were originally written, Superman could not fly. He could only leap 1/8 of a mile at a time.
Oh, okay.
So when you see Henry Cavill leaping those little leaps,
That would be why he's only American. He can't go nowhere else.
oh my God. And so
No, Preston, you're right. I mean, like
absolutely.
in the comics, it was probably just a few issues. I can't remember how many, but until they actually had him to start flying.
And that was an eventual development.
Yeah.
They developed the story to where he can just fly rather than just leap 1/8 of a mile at a time.
Yep.
Cool.
So to wrap that up, the parallel there is having the relationship with the Father, in our case, the Heavenly Father, who helps identify who you really are and gives you your origin story and the strength that you need to. And I thought that was a really cool segue that they did in the movie. Or at least that's the lens that I chose to view the movie through. I do want to wrap up this section by talking about Zod, because, as you know, when you watch sci-fi or you watch superhero movies, it's really, the movie's only going to be as good as the villain. You can have the greatest superhero ever, but if he doesn't have a worthy foe, then the movie's not going to really do very well.
I think that was the problem with Superman Returns. He just didn't. I mean, yeah, it was Lex again, but it was just like, you know,
Kevin Spacey, Lex.
Kevin Spacey, yeah. It's just-
Which I just had him as that axe murderer, that serial killer from Seven.
Oh my
In
God.
my mind.
You're just hoping Gwyneth Paltrow's not in the movie.
She's in the box.
Don't open the box!
Don't open the box.
What's in the box?
He made her a suspect.
Oh man.
What's in the box?
So let's talk about Krypton here for a minute. We opened that box a little bit earlier on, but Krypton is not the peaceful, perfect utopia.
No.
Yeah.
It's not the sterile, crystalline place that we see in Superman 1. It's a dark, totalitarian state. It's on the verge of collapse.
Well, just the fact that the government, or I guess you would call it the government, is willing to sacrifice its own core of the planet just
For its energy needs.
yeah,
How
just
about that?
to keep it
Well,
going.
that was another
Yeah.
reimagining of the story, because
Yeah.
in the 1978 movie you have our I guess our star or our planet, you know, it's about to explode. There's nothing we can do about it. Whereas in this version, you have Jor-El saying, "Listen, there are some scientific things going on. We can solve this. Just listen, and everything's going to be okay." And
Go
then-
to the stars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, there is a solution right here in front of us. There's nothing to be afraid of, and the ruling body just turns around and they just say that he's crazy, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah.
So they also have an engineered society where the babies, you're not allowed in Krypton to have
Natural birth.
Yeah.
The babies are all grown in test tubes, harvested, and they're genetically modified.
Genesis
chambers.
chambers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Spit that out.
They're genetically pre-written, if you will, with a certain purpose that they will fulfill in
To
society.
be a soldier, a scientist.
So that's very much reminiscent of classic sci-fi. For instance, Brave New World, Aldous Huxley. That's a definite reference there. Or if you even want to go back even further, Plato's Republic, where in Plato's Republic he talks about the ideal society where everybody fills a certain role and you're not able to move upwardly through your society. You just stay in your lane.
Yeah.
So you can understand Zod is a product of this, right? So let's talk about Zod a little bit. What made him so strong as a villain, as a character? What drew you to him? Why was his portrayal so well done?
Oh yeah. Go ahead, Nathan.
Well, I was going to say, I guess it's just because he is willing to kill an entire planet just so he thinks he can just bring back Krypton.
He thinks he's in the right.
Yes.
He's very
Yes.
much like
Thanos.
Yeah.
he's convinced he's in the right.
Yes,
Because
and they're both coming from an environmental disaster where
Right.
the resources has run out of their planet and they have to make a decision. Are we going to continue on the same path of destruction, or are we going to try and start over?
in this version of Superman, Zod is programmed to be the way that he is. He is genetically engineered
To be a soldier.
to be a soldier.
I guess he's following
and-
the old ways, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
it's
it almost
yeah.
you kind of do understand where he's coming from, even though he's a madman. You're like, I get it. Like he's just playing out the role that he was engineered to play.
And he really didn't snap to a certain point until he found out he destroyed the world. Cal destroyed the world engine, Superman, that he couldn't terraform Earth into the next Krypton. That was something they found where they were put in. What was the name of it? Where they were put in jail.
The Phantom Zone.
Phantom Zone.
Yeah. Because even in his own words, he said, I now have no purpose.
Yeah,
Because, again, that it was because of the genetic engineering, it's almost the same as programming a device where if for us as human beings, we can adapt to a new situation, but when something is programmed a certain way, it's almost like, well, there's no more purpose. I have no idea what to do.
And that's what he says in the movie.
Yeah.
He says, "You've destroyed the purpose for which I was created. Now
Exactly.
that I can't rebuild Krypton, so I'm just going to take down as many people
Yeah.
as I can."
Yeah.
Whereas by natural birth, Superman, on the other hand, being born on Krypton naturally, had that ability to
choose.
to think outside of the programming.
Yeah.
Well, I think was it Jonathan or was it no? It was Cal. No, it was Jor-El said, "You're as much a son of Krypton as you're a son of Earth. You're a son of both worlds now."
Yeah.
So, in a lot of ways, you can see how you understand where Zod is coming from, but you also see how he's unhinged. He's completely maniacal. He's almost has a Hitler-like or Nietzsche-like sense of morality, where only certain bloodlines
Oh yeah, he
can
did
be promoted.
Yes, he did mention
Right.
that.
It's survival of the fittest.
Because Jor-El says
mentality.
not every bloodline can exist, not just the one you choose.
Right. So it's
That's
it's
right,
very
Nathan,
much
I forgot
built
about
on
that.
kind of evolutionary worldview. And in fact, I think there is a line in the movie. Oh yeah, it's in the Smallville scene where I think her name's Fiora, the lieutenant.
Second.
Theora all.
There we go.
Yeah.
She is battling Kal-El, and she says to him, "You're weak because you have a sense of morality, and we don't, and that makes us stronger." And if history has proved anything, she says evolution always wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the mindset. That's the world. It's very secular. It's godless, if you will. It's survival of the fittest. Social Darwinism.
It's interesting the way you talk about the battle between Zod and Cal. It's the same thing as Jor-El was fighting with Zod. Jor-El was the scientist, and Zod was completely against him until after they fought and he killed him. Then he realized, hey, that haunts me every day now. They could have done it together, but they had completely different worldviews.
Yeah, so the interesting thing that I see there in the connection with spiritual life is that so much of what we see in our world as you try and live the Christian life is it's a battle of worldviews. It's the Christian worldview versus a secular worldview or a godless or a pagan worldview, which says that, no, we are really evolved and there is no God and it's survival of the fittest out there, and that's a very cruel and unjust way to live. And by the way, if you choose that worldview, there's really no way you can ground your morality in any sort of objective sense. How can you say, if there is no God, that there is a right and a wrong? No one vision of morality, whether it's Hitler or Mother Teresa, is better than the other if there is no way to really judge in an objective way the difference between good and evil. And so I see those two worldviews come into conflict there with Zod and Jor-El or Kal-El, whichever one. The idea that on Zod's end, that the ends justify the means.
Yeah,
right?
anyway, he's got to get there.
Versus, no, we have a choice, and we need to let this civilization choose for themselves
Yeah, and
how they will use their resources and
Yeah.
their ability.
Zod even says, "What? So we can go through years of pain and torture of trying to breathe like you did." And well, that's all I'm saying. I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but
So, but the crux is, where it comes down to, is we too, as humans, we all have the choice, the God-given free will of what path we will take. Will we serve God? Will we choose the side of truth and justice and love and compassion? Or will we turn inward like Zod and be selfish and justify our own means and live life according to our own principles, which can be very prideful and very, very selfish.
I caught the truth and justice in there.
Truth, justice, in the American way, right?
Good one.
So that brings to an end. We're going to tie a bow here on our theological discussion of part 2 of Man of Steel. It's been a blast. I hope that you've had fun. And I hope that as you listen to these broadcasts, you're beginning to learn how to watch film, how to break it apart, how to see the underpinnings, the philosophical and the theological ideas that are there. Remember, none of this comes out of a vacuum, and Hollywood is really taking the best storylines from the Bible, redemption and good versus evil, and these character-building stories that we love so much. They're all borrowed from God's great story, the grand story of history that he's been telling from Genesis 1:1 all the way to Revelation 22. So, happy watching out there, and we will see you next time on our episode coming up of the Inner Light Project.